And this was the kicking off the conference. Adam Selipsky tells this story that is in this book, that's written in this book, Code Girls. And basically during World War II, there was a shortage of talent to decrypt enemy messages. So the Army, shortage because all the men, half the workforce, were away serving in the war. And so the Army and the Navy had no choice but to recruit female university students. And I thought this was pretty neat that he chose to kick it off this way, to tell this story. They had the author get up, and it was pretty cool. So this was the very beginning of the conference, day one.
Absolutely, and one of the cool things is you get into the conference, and the conference really kind of gets momentum right from the beginning, because you have the CEO of Tableau come out and talk about here's the vision of where we're going, and talking about some of the really big kind of rocks around the new features and stuff like that. One of the things that with Tableau, when you think about user interface, you think about the interactivity and creating just an amazing experience. I think we've all seen some cool things in other data visualization tools, kind of deep breathe and other things, where animation kind of shows up. And so I know Tableau's been talking about animation for many years, kind of under the hood, and trying to figure out how would we create that type of experience. And so one of the big things that was announced coming next year, right? So we'll see when it shows up. But coming next year is animation, and how the animation works, what speed that it goes, all these different pieces and whatnot. And kind of a personal story for me is, way back when, before I ever got into this stuff, I was a civil engineer, graduated from a small trade school down the street over here, and I remember seeing this video on the Joy of Stats that profiled a guy named Hans Rosling. And inside that video, there's about 4 minutes where there's a conversation around 200 countries in 200 years in 4 minutes. And it was one of the coolest things I've literally ever seen in my whole life. And I was like, I don't know what that is or how that works or what you call that. That looks really fun. And like this is kind of 2009, 2010, when all this stuff was so cutting edge. And the cool thing is like once I got into Tableau and I had that same data set, I could do kind of the same thing in about 5 minutes. But it always was missing something. It was missing the animation piece. And so one of the things that they showed, so this is actually, so fast forward, I'll show you the picture in a minute. Actually got to meet Hans Rosling. And so one of the cooler moments of my life was, I was a Zen for a little while, and we had to have breakfast the year that I was a Zen with somebody really cool, and it just happened to be that I got to meet Hans Rosling. And so I told him, I was like, this was I think 2014. It was like 5 years ago. I had no idea what data was, but I saw your thing, and I was like, whatever that is, I want to do that. And so he died, I think in 2016, and it was, obviously very sad because I think he's one of the greatest. I think he is the greatest data storyteller of our time. But I felt super fortunate that I had the opportunity to meet him and just to hear him, and he is just as genuine and amazing of a person in real life as he always appeared to be. So, by the way, who's never heard of Hans? Because I always have to do that too, right? So if you go home later, Google or watch on YouTube 200 countries in 200 years, Hans Rosling, whatever, it would have blown you away a decade ago. In my mind, it still blows people away because it's still amazing.
It's here.
But yeah, so she's going to kind of talk you through this is what I'm saying. All right, so.
Let me show you. When I first heard we were investing in animations, the first visualization I thought of was of Hans Rosling's scatter plot.
So he does this in
showing life expectancy by family size. Here's a published version on the server. Each mark is a different country, and I've added years to my pages control, so I can view my data by year. And did you notice this button? That's right, we're adding the Pages Play button to the web. So, should we try it out? Let's follow the mark where I ran as we travel through time. Now, instead of clicking through every year in a filter, for the first time on web, and with just one click, I can
if anyone saw Iron Viz a few years ago when they did the housing bubble, Iron Viz, I think Tristan won that year, but his viz was all about like leading up to the housing bubble. You saw like house prices like rising, and then you saw them fall. But when he played it during Iron Viz, you know, he hit play and it went through like this animations, and it was really cool. But when he published it to Tableau, yeah, it wasn't the same. So I think this is pretty cool.
Who's excited about some animations? Kind of cool. Yeah. There you go. There we go.
I think Nelson said it too, but they did mention that you'll have the ability to turn them on, turn them off, slow them down, speed them up. So there's a lot of customization that comes with it.
Yeah, I'm excited. I think it just enhances the user experience, the ability to kind of track where something's coming from, kind of where it's going, as opposed to just kind of a doink. So very cool. All right, so another thing, and sometimes Tableau comes with features that you're like, really? Y'all didn't have that already? But you know, the idea of Tableau was always that it's designed to be interactive visualizations. And so when it comes to bursting PDFs, which is something that like Crystal Reports and a bunch of other things could do for a very long time, I think they were fundamentally resistant to some of these things. But now at this point, the concept of bursting reports in PDF.
Who has like, this is a really big deal for us. Like, we get a lot of questions about, I want to see this dashboard, but I want a PDF of it. You know, right now I'll get a view of it, I subscribe to it, but I want a PDF of it as well. And this, so to me, when I saw this, I really like this. I like having the view in the email and being able to click on it, but there's something to be said for printing it out and just having it go out like that.
And the formatting that goes with that.
Yeah.
That's a nice piece. Okay. Another thing that is not necessarily new this year, but continue to have a ton of enhancements, is this concept of Ask Data. Who has used Ask Data with Tableau and whatnot? I was really thinking more hands were going to go up. Seriously, people? Who has no idea what Ask Data is? Okay, so let's give you all a little bit of background. So the concept of Ask Data is, you know, hey, we're going to build Tableau dashboards, we're going to build visualizations, they're designed to answer specific questions, right? What if I have a different question? What if I need to ask something else on the fly? And let's also say, for example, I'm not a few really bright and talented people who have this background in data, but what if I'm somebody in either a different department, or I'm at a maybe more executive level where my technical background is not exactly what I need in order to ask that question with data, but I still need to know the answer I need to know now. The idea of Ask Data is it's going to take a typed-in question and that you would ask it with just natural language.
Like the way you would Google something.
The way you would Google something. Like, you know, what was revenue back in 2017 or something like that, right? I mean, something very basic like that. And it would take that question, and that's a very basic one, but if you can actually handle things more and more complicated all the time, you can take that question and basically translate that into a query and return to you the query. And then using best practices, it would return a visualization to you. So not only the answer, but also a visualization would go with it. The cool thing is, some of the enhancements you see now are that you can ask a bunch of follow-on questions. You can actually begin to interact with the visualization that it produces. You can kind of take that visualization, use that as a launching point, and begin to create dashboards off of that visualization and others. And so there's a ton of really cool things that are happening in this space. And what you the space here is what we call NLP, or natural language processing. Just processing your natural language, querying the data, using the data set, and then returning back the answer to you. Any published data source that you have on, I want to say, Tableau Server 2019.1 and beyond is a candidate for Ask Data. So if you're on 2019.1 and more, or greater, and it gets better every time, you have the ability to use Ask Data. All you have to do is go to that data source, click on it, and there'll be a little button up the top that says Ask Data, and you get to the screen. So really cool stuff. I think we have a little video on that one. Sweet. Take that one.
Forward.
Click forward.
One more time. Oh wait, this is explain data.
Oh, okay. So hold on. Before
Takes it a step further.
Yeah. So explain data. This is a new concept, so I don't imagine a ton of y'all have looked into this yet. But explain data is a cool. Go back one slide because I think it gives us a little bit of a setup. So explain data is basically saying, okay, I've got a scatter plot, or I've got this visualization somehow, And everything makes sense, but that little dot over there, what's going on over there? I don't understand why that's over here. What's driving the fact that, that seems off, or, that's really high compared to everything else? And the idea of explained data is you have the ability now to click on that data point. And what Tableau's going to do is basically look through all the different dimensional components, and using a bunch of Bayesian algorithms, it's going to attempt to explain to you what drove the fact that this data point is where it is. What's different about this data point as compared to the other data points that you didn't click on, like kind of the other data that seems more normal, right? And so Tableau is using a bunch of statistical algorithms, it's using a bunch of data science, again, all under the covers, so it's kind of an easy button to kind of say, hey, what drove this? If we're doing that on our own, the challenge becomes, okay, maybe I want to zero into this, but now I got to drag out a ton of different dimensional things, or do some sort of regressional model or something like that, and kind of test out a bunch of different hypotheses, right? What Tableau's going to do is do all that automatically and do it in seconds. And so I love it because it helps you get to the answer a lot faster. It helps you then kind of find what's the next thing. So this is a little bit of a picture of it, but I think there's a good explanation here. All right. There we go. You're good.
Now, going back to the dashboard, explain data works on all of your data. Over here on the right, I have a scatter plot showing the MPG of the new car versus the trade-in car. And there's a clear outlier with Montana. So apparently, Montana is way more fuel efficient than anywhere else, right? Let's take a look at what could be driving this with explain data.
So if you have 2019,
Explain data can generate different types of explanations. And in this case, it's looked through the entire data set, every single dimension and measure, and found a single extreme value. Just one sale. Someone from Montana has purchased a Ford truck with an MPG of 6,500?
Strong.
Either Ford has designed an insanely fuel-efficient truck, or there is a data entry error. And now I want to know what Montana would look like without this data error. Well, explain data has tested that scenario automatically for me. Let's take a look. Yeah. And now I can see Montana's right in the middle of the pack without that data error. And I can easily include it again or exclude it again. Statistical analysis for everyone in just seconds. How freaking awesome is that?
How freaking awesome is that? Yeah, so this is, again, the things you begin to think about. Could we do that? Sure. Would it have been time consuming? Absolutely. And you have to be thoughtful about how you need to go figure some of these things out. So this gives you the ability. One of the things I've always loved about Tableau, I think it's great for building kind of enterprise dashboards. I think it's world class in doing ad hoc analysis to explain things really fast. And as you dig into a bunch of data that somebody hands you and says, hey, I got an hour, tell me what's going on with all this stuff, you explain data, if you see an outlier, it's like, well, I need to know what's driving that outlier. So I got 10 minutes, right? So now you hit a button, it's like, oh, well, now I got the answer, and I have 9 minutes and 30 seconds, right? So, I think that that's brilliant stuff, and it allows you to dig in and look at data quality, and probably will allow you to identify other data quality issues of things that just don't make sense, right? Okay, a couple more things from that original keynote, and then I'm going to press the gas here. Another thing that Tableau talked about a little bit last year, but really pulled the covers back this year, is a new concept around data modeling. And so this is, in my mind, when I went and saw this, and I immediately went to a session that was focused on this, and I looked at it, I was like, this is a total, absolute game changer for the way that people use data in this tool and the way that people understand data in this tool. I'll let them explain it to you and then kind of come back and give you a little bit of thoughts on the back end of this as well. Oops.
Grab our states, grab our population, and sort. But wait, that cannot be right. California does not have...
So he's going to do something that doesn't make any sense first, right? So real quick background. He's got He's got products that are being sold, right? He's got like kind of the sales. Hey, we sold these deals. Inside those deals, they have these products. Boom. And he's also going to bring in a state dimensional table that has population, right? So if you think about it, he's creating a Cartesian join because the sales each have state. So he's got like 7 or 8 rows that all have the state of California, right? So if you have the population of California, it's going to get multiplied 7 or 8 times because of the way the join is set up, right? So what he's basically showing you is this doesn't work because it doesn't make sense because I'm trying to join on state, but it creates a Cartesian product. Many of you should, everybody's kind of thumbs up there, right? We've all seen when like we get more rows of data than we hope to get, and now the numbers don't make sense. Now we're going to do funky calculations in order to make the numbers actually make sense again. So that's what he's showing here. Sorry, let me get that. I should have set that up a little better.
Over 4 billion people. What has happened here? I know.
He tells us why.
Let's look at the data source.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
The population table has 1 row per state, but the opportunities table has many opportunities in each state. So when I join them together, the population of each state is multiplied by the number of opportunities.
That does actually happen in real life, and it does make it easy to
handle
make
this today, I would have to write a complex level of calculation. But instead, let's see what happens when I use a future version of Tableau. Here, I am connected to the same sales opportunities. And watch this time what happens when I drag out population. Instead of a join, we get what my team calls the noodle. It is a fun. That's right, it is so much fun. And it is a powerful tool for building relationships between tables. The tables are not yet joined. In the data grid below, I can see that each one has its own columns and rows. Instead of forming that join now, the relationship defers the join to viz time. I don't have to decide, that's right, thank you. I don't have to decide in advance how I want to join the data or what my level of detail should be. Relationships let Tableau use my analysis to intelligently choose the correct level of detail and join for each visualization. No more join planning required.
So I'm not gonna lie, like this, when he was talking, I was like, this is magic, but it's like all over my head. So is what he's
So
saying.
now let's check on that population again.
Depending on
The population and sort. And oh, does that look so much better? California.
The trick to notice
California
is
is right about
this
40
over here
million,
now
as
is
I would
different.
expect.
So instead of being
No
dimensions
more
and measures,
complex
it's
level of
actually set
detail
up by
calculations
data source.
required.
And that's the beginning of the difference.
Now, some of you may recognize this from the keynote last
Hold on,
year.
keep watching this.
This is our new data model. But this is just the beginning. In the past, adding another table of data at a different level of detail would have required careful thinking about what joins to use and, more importantly, what questions those support.
Okay. So if that was cool, what I would suggest to you is you'd certainly go back and watch that part of the, I think that was the keynote one. But in addition to that, there's a 60-minute deep dive in how this thing works that Bethany Lyons did. So if you, again, all these things are almost every single one of the videos from the conference is on YouTube. And so if you go to Tableau Conference and Google data model and Bethany Lyons, Lyons with a Y, she did a 60-minute deep dive that I went to that was like, oh my gosh, my mind's totally blown. This is amazing. And it'll be interesting. I think the people that don't know anything about data, it'll work really well. You're like, oh yeah, this is great. And then the people that know a ton about data, who understand Cartesian joins and all this other stuff, they'll be like, oh man, this is great. I think the gotcha is going to be the people in the middle who are like, wait, this used to not work and now it's working and I don't know why, right? That's going to be the gotcha. So
That's me.
we'll find out, right? So that's the thing is that all coming next year, right? So 2020 something. But I will say, I would actually imagine this is probably closer than we think it is. I might say like a .2. The reason I say that is because we actually saw a version of that last year, and it was like, there's no way y'all know how to do this, right? And they were, like, when it was explained last year, it was like, if your DBA had set this up in the right way, and I was like, no, that's never gonna work, right? And it's not, no offense to the DBAs in the room, but it's like, if you didn't have to, you probably didn't. Set up everything up with foreign keys and primary keys and da-da-da. And so anyway, go check it out. It's a much smarter. I think one thing that this is going to do is it's going to take advantage hugely of the hyper engine. So you'll be able to, for a while now, you've been able to extract data without flattening the table. So you extract the data into the tables that they come from. So it makes the extract smaller and it makes things much more performant. The other thing this is going to do is with your live connections, so if you're on a Snowflake or an Exasol or a high performance analytic database, it really will leverage the horsepower that you have in those databases because it's not going to do the full set of joins. It's going to only use each table as it sees fit. So you have that referential integrity where it's not pulling the fact table every time it doesn't need to, and it's going to know your level of detail. You also don't have to spend so much time thinking about what's the right way to put all this together so I can avoid all the cardinality issues. So, whereas before, one of the other things that we cut it off before they got to it, but the ability to do many-to-many relationships has always been a bugaboo for Tableau because it wants to flatten the table. That now works. So many-to-many now is, so the many-to-many relationship, the easiest way to think about that is you have a sales table and you have a discounts table, right? And you got a bunch of these and a bunch of those, and if you do this, it makes a big honking mess with the stuff, right? That now works because of these relationships. And again, too much to go into. Go check out Bethany's stuff. But huge stuff we're going to go into. So, Tableau server, bunch of improvements, things like...
Wait, one cool thing, I think this is pretty cool. It's like little pins. So let's say you have metrics that are out there in a number of different workbooks. The ability to pin specific metrics that are tracked across like all those workbooks to come out to like your own little thing like this on your Tableau server. I think that's pretty cool. I know that we get that question a lot. Like, I have to go now to 6, 7 different workbooks just to see the information I'm really interested in. So something like this, that definitely got my attention when you talked about that.
Well, and one other thing that, in a similar way, but one of the things that we're always getting asked about is like, hey, how do I make sure that all of my numbers from different parts of the business correspond to each other? I can totally think of creating a set of pins where it's like, what is the revenue number from finance? What's the revenue number from logistics? And so like everybody who has all their different revenue numbers, you create a metric up here, and if your revenue numbers don't equal my revenue numbers, then one of us ain't right? So that's another kind of interesting use case for being able to do this, is that it doesn't matter what the data source is, it doesn't matter what the workbook is, you can create a metric and kind of have it change the looks of that metric. Cool? And then...
Yeah, this is the last one.
Who's ever used Tableau once and thought to yourself, man, if those parameters were dynamic, that would be so helpful? Raise your hand. Every hand in the room should go. I have been using Tableau since 2011, and I know that because my firstborn, I found Tableau and I had my first kid about at the same time. He's now 8.5, and so even since I started, I was like, wait, why are the parameters don't update? What's the deal there? And so literally, and I remember having a conversation with Tableau, come on, this dynamic parameters make it happen. And finally, they've done a couple different things. And we're like, hey, I think we got it. And we're like, no, still don't have it. They finally just
It was the number one feature request.
It's been the number one feature request for 7 years. You now have fully dynamic parameters, and the amount of amazing things that you can do with fully dynamic parameters is absolutely nuts. That along with dynamic sets and set actions, and parameter actions. I mean, the sky's the limit on
Not having to republish a workbook, just to get the most up-to-date date in there. It'll always know, go to the most recent date, whatever. It's pretty helpful.
Yes. And as much as we've talked already, there's still so much more that we're not covering. So if you're curious about this or some of the other things, feel free to go check out the keynote. So kind of the back half of the keynote would be kind of where you'd find some of these big blocks, and then the devs on stage stuff is where a bunch of the other stuff is. A whole bunch of stuff on mapping and server that we didn't really get into. Okay.
On to the session.
On to the session. So obviously the keynotes are really cool. You have you and 20,000 of your closest friends are all hanging out and kind of get the download and whatnot. Sweet. And then you go to your breakout sessions. And so some really, really cool ones. One, both Karen and I are going to talk about a handful of different things. So, a woman named Cole Nussbaumer-Knaflic wrote a book called Storytelling with Data. Who's ever read it, seen it? Awesome. Yeah. What Cole is fantastic at is helping people take analysis and figure out how do we tell this story in such a way that it actually has an impact, right? And I think we would all be very transparent to say the goal of any analysis that we do is that somebody's going to make a better decision the next time or a better decision the first time, right? We want to create things that create action. And so there's a lot to learn from a person like Cole and kind of her methodologies that allows you to kind of dig in. And so I'm going to set this up just a little bit. Actually, let's, for the sake of time, go ahead and move past this one. I'll kind of give us a setup. If you ever do one of Cole's workshops, or again, this is all, she's fantastic. She's got some other things that I've seen her do. But she kind of introduces this dashboard and basically says, like, she's giving you a scenario where she's walking in and she's about to present this to the chief marketing officer, and she spent weeks putting this together. She didn't sleep last night, and she puts it in there, kind of shows it, and within like 30 seconds, the person's like, "Hey, I need more data. This doesn't answer my question," and it kind of like walks off. And she's like, "Well, that didn't work, right?" And she just starts to talk about, what's the approach of how do we create something that actually tells a story, and how do we create something where it has the impact that we want. It prompts decisions, it creates action, and so forth. So go to the next piece. So one of the things that she does that I love is she begins to think about, let's just talk about what is the data telling us, and what are some of the levers we can pull. If we're trying to create actionable insights, let's think about the actions that we could possibly take. Who would take those? How would that work? What are we seeing? What is what we're seeing leading us towards an action? Right? So she starts with kind of taking this, brainstorming and kind of saying, okay, I've done kind of a low-level analysis, and I know something about this data, but I don't know where I want to take it or how I want to design this dashboard. And I will say one thing too. I will say one thing too. What you would get if you followed Cole's methodology is very much a story as opposed to an interactive dashboard. Storytelling and building business dashboards definitely have some differences and nuance. What she's going to talk you through is like, how would you give a 20-30 minute presentation, walking somebody through the analysis, and then kind of saying, here's the things that we think you should do. That's not, I think most people in this room are using Tableau with interactivity. Most of you are building dashboards, and again, there's just some difference in the approach, but there's definitely things to learn from this. So she kind of, says, hey, iterate through this, let's keep this, let's make this, these things here are, decision pieces and whatnot. Go to the next one. So this is kind of how she sums it all up. This is a 2 minutes that I think is great.
Stories typically follow a narrative arc. You start off, there's a plot. Some sort of tension is introduced. That tension builds in the form of a rising action. It reaches a point of climax. There's a falling action, a resolution. Right, Pete and Larry followed this story to the T. Started off plot. On their way on the ferry for a grand exploration of Seattle. But then tension is introduced when the pair gets separated. That tension builds over the course of the book. They each wander the city independently trying to find each other. It reaches a point of climax when they wonder, will we ever find each other again? But then we start to see a falling action as their paths lead them towards each other. And finally, an ending. The pair is reunited. That tension that was introduced is resolved. We are hardwired to remember stories that come to us in this form. Challenge is, the typical business presentation doesn't really look like this. Right? Typical business presentation follows a more linear path. We might start off with a question. Right? What did we set out to solve for in the first place? Then the data and analysis, right? What did we look at? Where did we get it? What assumptions did we make? What do we have to do to clean it? What were the statistical methodologies that we employed? Then our findings. What did we learn through our analysis of the data? And then finally, our recommendations. What might we do now differently given what we've learned from the data? This is pretty much what my storyboard looked like, right? This is the path that comes most naturally to us when we communicate, oftentimes, because this is the path we go through as analysts when we're analyzing data. This is a very selfish path. Because at no point in this traditional linear path do I have to give any thought to my audience. And that, for me, is the biggest shift that takes place. When we move from thinking about our business presentations on a linear path to rethinking them using the shape of the arc. Take a look at what this might look like for my store traffic story. Let's start off with the plot, right? Backing up, sales are driven by a couple of components, traffic and basket. Traffic's down. It's down across regions, right? This is our tension starting to interject and build. It's down especially for our super shoppers, who, by the way, are really important. Basket's also down for our super shoppers. All of this means that sales are down. Decide how dramatic you want to get at that point. But all is not lost, right? The super shopper basket has some interesting things going on that actually highlight some opportunities. Items are down, but average price per item is up. We, by the way, have been doing some luxury brand promotions that have been wildly successful. So let's do a couple of things. Let's support marketing's pilots to increase traffic. And let's do more with this luxury brand super shopper combo we've been seeing. Here, resolution is what you, audience, can do to resolve the climax, the tension.
Hey. So before everybody says, "Hey, that's cool," but I don't have time to do that because I'm busy doing all the other things that my job requires. If you're saying that in your job title is analyst or analyst in any way, shape, or form, I'm going to argue with you that is actually what your job is supposed to be, and not pulling all the data that you're pulling. And that's why automating all of your data and having the great platforms and great databases and whatnot is really important, so that you can actually do that, because that's actual analysis as opposed to what we spend most of our time doing. Right? So I'm talking about utopia land, but I just thought it would be worthwhile to mention that that's what it's supposed to be. So real quick, that is, in my mind, kind of really good analysis. Like, hey, here's what's going on, here's what's creating tension. But if it's not your job to figure out what the solution is, I would ask you whose job you think it is inside your organization. Is there somebody else who knows the data better than you? I don't think so. I think the people in this room are probably the rock stars of their organizations. And so one of the things that I think is great to think about is that should cause some tension, and your analysis should be causing tension. And the reason that tension is good is because action requires tension, right? And so the idea is that we need to make sure that we're creating some tension with the analysis that we do, right? If you want to create actual insights, we have to find tension in this, right? And so you just want to make sure that you're not just giving a number to answer a question, right? That's not what was done there. A number is not hardly ever good enough, but we get tempted into doing it because it's easy. So again, I would encourage you to check out some of the stuff that Cole put together. She's a fantastic speaker and thinker in the space of stories on the data. So here we go.
Okay, so this was one of my favorite sessions. It was a short talk. I'll walk this way because I feel like the side of the room is ignored. So these two folks, one of the reasons I like this session, you see Lindsay and Kevin here, they're Tableau ambassadors. I do this thing with Tableau. I admire certain people's visualizations, and one way I've really learned Tableau is reverse engineer those, download them, try to figure out like how did they do this? And this is one of those. So I remember this being Viz of the Day. I think it won Viz of the Week. I remember seeing it and thinking it looked like National Geographic or something. And I'm going to go to this session because they're going to explain their thought process and how they built it. And they shared a lot of like just tips and tricks about ways you can create some of these interesting elements that you see up here. All right, and one thing that I also found interesting, so you see this like masterpiece over here. It's so many iterations just to get to that, and they stressed that and shared a lot about like the journey of, yeah, it looks awesome right here, but it actually took a lot of like failed attempts, like trying this one thing and then it didn't work, and trying something else and something else and something else. Okay, so across the very top of the viz, you see this like red bubble. One thing that's pretty interesting, so the whole viz is about the cheetah population and how it's approaching endangered or extinction. And they mimicked this, I want to say it's called IUNC. I looked that up this morning and I cannot remember what it stands for, but it's something like National Conservation, but they mimicked that.
International Union for Conservation of Nature.
Thank you. Okay.
Your notes.
Okay, thank you. So anyway, I thought that was neat. That's a cool element that they did. It's right up there at the top, and it highlights cheetah is in endangered status. There you go. All right, so here you see Lindsay sketched out in the beginning. She knew she wanted to have a cheetah with some facts around the cheetah, like a cheetah running through the viz. And so you see that right here. I think if you click, yeah, there you go. This fast facts. You can click forward. Okay, but you'll notice there's a lot of information on this, like tons of data. They crammed so much information into this thing. So one thing she did that I thought was pretty cool is you can hover over the cheetah, and they use tooltips to provide details about the cheetah's body. So you hover over like the mouth, and it'll talk about like the bite strength, or you hover over the leg, and it'll give you information on like how fast the cheetah runs. You get the idea. And if you click forward, she kind of shares how they did that, which is they literally stuck a piece of graph paper over the cheetah, and that's how they got the X and Y axis. Has anyone tried to do this before? You have? Okay, so I have two. So while I was putting these slides together, I thought, just in case anyone else is interested in doing something like this, if this would ever be valuable, there's another way you can get very precise X and Y coordinates. I probably learned this from one of y'all, because I know I did not come up with this on my own, but I've done it before, and it's...
Does anybody know the punchline?
Yes!
There you go. Invitations.
All right, you guys already know it.
No.
Maybe not everybody knows it.
This is awesome though.
All right, so you create an X and a Y calc. You just create a very simple calc. Like I think I literally created an X and a Y that was just equals like 1, both of them. Drop them in your rows and your columns, and then go to the background, images under maps, add it, and I just put this cheetah on here. If you right click, I think I picked the tail, you can see, you get like a little menu that says annotate. And if you do that, it will give you a precise coordinate, exactly what you need. So that's another way that it's like Tableau graph paper, that instead of just holding a piece of paper over it.
And you pick up the end of that and drag it wherever you want to on this XY coordinate. It will give you that. Those X and Y's will update to 9 decibels in real time. So it's super cool.
Okay, so Kevin, at this point in his talk, was explaining he was really trying to compare the decline he was really trying to drive this one point home, that the cheetah population has declined a whole bunch. So he was trying to compare, here's where we were in 1900, and here's where we are in the year 2016. So he needed some way to visually show that, and I thought this was pretty cool. So they started off with a waffle chart. So see the square, like here's 1900, number of cheetahs, and here we are today. And then you see like another iteration, and they decided to go with these like cheetah spots, which I thought was pretty cool, especially given most what they have on the viz is like circles. So it definitely works better. I would have never thought of this, and I thought that was a really neat way to show it. I think I have maybe 1 or 2 more little graphs. Okay, this one. So how did they do that? I remember seeing this thinking, what is this? What kind of crazy graph is this? So this is actually really interesting. Does anyone use PowerPoint a good bit? You don't need Adobe Illustrator or anything like that. You have PowerPoint, we all have PowerPoint. You got exactly what you need. So here, what this is, if you advance, yeah, okay, so it's this graph.
I'm sorry.
So all they've done is, a red pie chart. Then you create this image that you want to overlay on top of it in PowerPoint, change the color to white, and you float that on top of the pie chart. And it's that simple. Pretty neat trick. And similarly, these round maps. So they mentioned in the talk that they were inspired by Johnny Walker. So if anyone has heard of him or seen any of his stuff, yeah, he's also, I think he works at Tableau, but he creates
Different
these,
Johnny Walker.
yeah, different.
I know what you were thinking.
Yes.
Shame on you.
Okay. But go out to Tableau Public and search Johnny Walker, and you'll see some of his visualizations. They're really cool. Most of them are animals or the environment, but they're very like National Geographic, and he does a lot of stuff like this. And Kevin and Lindsay said, they saw something he did like this, like a round map, and it was interactive, and they wanted to recreate that. So here's how they did it. Again, PowerPoint. All right, you go to PowerPoint and create that, and you've got a box where you've got like white or whatever the background of your viz is, but then the inside circle, you make that portion transparent, and you float that over the map, so you can interact with the map, but the sides, you don't see the sides. Same for the shadow. Also pretty easy to create in PowerPoint and make everything else transparent, and then float it over wherever you need to have a shadow on the viz and do your shadow. So I know this isn't really something you would do at work necessarily, but I thought these were some pretty cool tricks, and in case anyone ever needs them, thought those made it into my notebook to share with you guys.
Some of the times when I'm thinking about kind of going extra mile is I'm thinking about the audience. And so if I'm doing something for a C-level executive, that's when I started thinking about what's next level, and how could we create something that would be interesting to that audience. So
we've created our annual performance report in Tableau. So I really initially did it just to automate it, but it's the one report we do every year. We used to hire a contractor and pay someone a good bit of money to like use like an Adobe Illustrator or whatever for the graphics. But having used Tableau long enough now, I just spend a little time and try to make it. I mean, I'm not like this, but any little things that you can do like that, I think people would be surprised what all you can do in Tableau, like that you can make things like this, and it's actually not crazy difficult.
yeah, PowerPoint is super powerful, and it's one of those things that I think I laughed, but I learned it from Mark Jackson, and I was like, hey, how do you do all that cool stuff? And he was like, yeah, my graphic design tool of choice is PowerPoint. And I was like, and there's 1,000 different ways you can do PowerPoint and then export to PNG, and boom, there it is, it's right there. So it's a fantastic tool for doing some very interesting stuff and making your stuff kind of separate from the crowd. All right.
Okay, one other session that I really enjoyed, it was a Zen Master session called Design Secrets. And it was Chantilly, I'm probably going to mess up her last name, Yagernoff?
No.
No? Oh well, okay, well.
It's more of a jug.
Okay, anyway.
What is it? You remember? Yeah.
Okay, you guys know who I'm talking about. She's awesome.
Chantilly Juggernaut.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry.
You're good.
So she's a Zen Master. She has a very unique style. Like you would recognize a lot of her visualizations if you saw them. And she covered these things in her talk, but I'll just focus on the top two because I thought they were particularly interesting and useful. So here's something she does, and all of this is available like online. You can download it, and I have everything like links to workbooks and links to all this stuff like in the notes. So I'll post this, and you guys will have access to all of this. Don't worry, but check this out. So Chantilly has this dashboard requirements document, and I thought when I saw this, that is really, really smart. So you'll see she's got like an overview section. She's got audience with different options. How is the dashboard going to be used, like displayed? Are people going to use it on their phone? And then this views down here. How do people want to consume this, like on the web, PDF, Is it just going to be used, like are the graphs going to be exported and put into a PowerPoint? It's all this information that I'm sure a lot of you like me, this is stuff that you're thinking of, like already probably, but to have this organized document is pretty cool. And I also remember thinking, if you have new folks on your team, a more junior analyst, just something to prompt folks to like think through these things and what types of specs, requirements should I even be gathering like when I'm talking to somebody. That was pretty cool. I've never seen this before.
That is spot on, and I think, Karen, you said it really well. You're gonna end up having to figure these things out, but if you're not thinking about it on the front end, you typically are thinking about it too late, right? You get to, 2/3 of the way through a project, you're building something, you're like, oh yeah, by the way, it has to be sized for an iPad, and you're like, oh. All right, fine. And so now you're like, resizing everything, doing all this stuff, where you could have asked that question at the very beginning and thanked yourself later, right? And so I think this is just a great reminder of what are the questions that I need to be asking and thinking about on the front end.
Yeah, and like I said, this whole thing is out there, and there's a link in my notes, so you guys can go and download it. But this is just an example of her having filled it out. Like she even went to the trouble of like copying and pasting like the hex numbers for the colors and like the color palette to use. And it's just a lot of things. I thought it was a very well organized way to approach a dashboard that might save people time in the end.
Just a funny note, I actually sat with Chantilly the morning she was presenting this, and she was going through, and like she was on slide number like 269, and I was like, that's a lot of slides. She's like, yep. And I was like, okay, cool. So there's a lot of content in that presentation. I wasn't there for
No, there was. Chuck wasn't there with me. Yeah, we were sitting together and just like blown away. Okay, so another thing she mentioned, which I thought was really interesting and very cool, I kind of already do this. I don't know how many of you guys do this, but creating a template. So I don't do this in terms of like, I don't have pre-made templates that I just drop things into. I don't do that. But one thing I'll do, instead of like maybe sketching everything out on paper, is using containers as like a placeholder. A lot of times I'll even put like, I'll have an idea of what I want in my head, and instead of drawing it out on paper, I mean, sometimes I do that, but I might just put like line chart here, bar graph here, map here, just to like block it off the way I know that I'm gonna wanna organize it, and then I'll start working on like one thing at a time. So she kind of talked about that's one thing she does, and she creates templates, and she talked about recycling, like reusing these things again and again. So if you click forward, you'll see like how it's kind of coming together, and click forward one more time, sorry, and I was like, Okay, so a lot of her, remember I said, has anyone seen anything Chantilly's made? Yeah, it's really cool, like she does a great job, but they all do like, they look very similar. But I've always just thought, oh, like that's like her design style, like that's like, just her style. And it is, but she also said she literally just like opens this one up and puts that stuff in it. And just changes the colors, and that just made me think, I wonder how often I could do that, and I'm like recreating the wheel,
There's nothing.
Yeah. And here's another example. So, anyways, for some reason that just stuck out to me it's just a good idea.
One thing I'll say too, and just to give a little bit more flesh as well, is as I'm doing this and we're putting a project together or something like that, I'll talk to somebody and say, hey, what's your biggest question? Right? What's the thing that this has to answer? Right? And the eyes, I think everybody understands, right? Top left is our most important thing, right? So whatever's on top, so our big KPIs that you've got up here, the first visualization, that top left visualization, that's primary real estate. So you're going to be answering that very most important question, top left, and then kind of a Z, right, is the way to think about the way that the eye works. And you're going to go across, come down, and then go over. So that bottom right should be kind of your least important, but still got to be there type of stuff. But think about it in order of priority of the questions. Obviously, they have to go together, and the analysis has to kind of flesh together and whatnot. But that's a way that I think about using this kind of design template. It's a great way to kind of present somebody and say, hey, if we answered these questions and these things worked together, would that give you the ability to do the analysis that you needed to do, right? And sometimes we'll think, well, could it do this? And you're like, yeah. we do this and this and this, and boom, that would be there, and you'd be able to answer the question. Okay, got it, perfect. So another thing to think about as you're thinking about how you're going to set up your dashboard is to, because iterations at this point are super cheap, right? It's like, well, you just erase it, and go back again, and you do it again. If you're building this and doing all the data and stuff like that, you talk about days and weeks, right? Potentially. So, time's cheap at this stage of the game. That's one of the reasons that thinking through it as much as you possibly can on the front end is really helpful. Awesome. We have a few more minutes. You want to talk about speed tipping, then we'll end with...
Okay, I just have literally like 2 slides for speed tipping, and I think that might be the last one about a session. And we'll talk about Iron Viz. So this was something that was really cool. You guys might already know this. People might already be using this, but it stood out to me as a very handy tip. The sign function. So this is from Ann Jackson, who's a Zen Master, and she had a speed tipping session, but basically this is like a super simple function. It's a formula. Take the sign of whatever the field is, and all it's going to do is just return, what does it say? Okay, it's going to give you a 0 or a 1, whether that value
Or
is...
negative 1.
Oh, or negative 1? Okay.
1 for positive, 0 for 0, and negative 1 for negative.
Okay, gotcha. Okay, so basically you're just figuring out, is it positive or negative? So here's one potential use case. Like, let's say you have sales, the bar graph is sales, like superstore sales, and let's say you only want to color like unprofitable, categories, or you only want to you want to highlight really quick, maybe let's pretend the bars are sales dollars, but maybe you want to color it based on sales increase or decrease. So using that formula can be really, really handy.
Absolutely. All right.
Laughing.
Well, I'm laughing because I know what's coming next.
Oh.
Which is Iron Viz. So I'm thinking to myself, it's a shame we didn't do the video on the front end of this because it's absolutely hilarious. Who has ever in their lives stayed up too late watching the Food Channel and they did Iron Chef of some sort, right? Oh, come on. There's more hands in there. Y'all are not playing my game. Hands, please. Seriously. Who's seen Iron Chef? Okay, that's better. The rest of your life. So concept of Iron Chef is that, hey, you have, some hours, I don't know what it is, but there's secret ingredients and that's going to be revealed and then you're going to build this, 17-course meal and in 1 hour and it's going to be amazing and you're going to go against Bobby Flay and all that stuff, right? So very similar concept of Iron Viz. And so Iron Viz comes in and basically says, all right, we have these rock stars, and these rock stars are vetted rock stars. The reason they've been vetted is because there are feeder competitions leading into the Tableau conference that happen kind of starting in about late spring, early summer typically, and probably earlier this year because conference is going to be on. But anybody in the world can enter, and if you tend to go against about 100-something people they've got to go through. And you're judged on storytelling and visual appeal and user experience.
Typically not beginners.
Yeah. Well, it's funny you say that because the guy, well, we'll get to the punchline in a minute, but one of the guys that actually won has been using Tableau for less than a year. And we'll show you the visualization put together, just take that in real quick, right? So there's really not a lot of excuses because you're like, oh, well, I've only been using Tableau for X, and it's like, yeah, but that guy. So, just a second, right? So anyway, long story short, these folks were given the data about a week and a half in advance. The data this year was about 8 million rows of data on restaurants, food stores around the world. And the gotcha is that these good folks spend endless hours for the days leading up to this building a dashboard. And then the other next gotcha is they have to then build that dashboard in 20 minutes live in front of 18,000 people.
No pressure.
No pressure, right? And I've been going to this. I was telling Karen, like the first time I ever went to this, Iron Viz was a session, right? And this was like in 2013, Ryan Sleeper won it, and there were about it was him and Kelly Martin and Ben Jones, maybe I can't remember, but
I think Ben might be next year.
I don't know. Anyway, long story short though, there was 250 people there.
But it's
now
changed. It is in production.
And it is. It was always a little bit of production, but it's definitely cool. So, and I've also been really close to the action. I've had 2 very good friends of mine, John Mathens, who I worked with at Slom back in 2014, actually won Iron Viz. and kind of gave him some thoughts and pumped him up as he was going into that. And then another good friend of mine, Matt Chambers, competed in 2015 and did not win, but did a great job. You also see all sorts of things. I know that Jeffrey Schaefer competed and his laptop blue screened to death while he was doing it and totally froze in the beginning. He's like, anything can happen, people. Anything can happen. So, long story short, you want to talk about some of the cool things that we saw?
Oh yeah, you gotta see this. Okay, this should be a GIF.
Is it?
If it's not, that is such a shame. Because you have to see this in action. Okay, watch this. What?
What?
Is anybody picking up on this?
So why would this be handy in the first place? The reason is, again, you have 20 minutes, and one of the things they allow you to do is write out your calculations ahead of time. And so
Copy paste.
So you basically kind of copy paste, and then what's happening here? If you'll explain that.
Yeah. So I actually think this could maybe even be useful at work or outside of Iron Biz. But if you have some really crazy calculations that you tend to use frequently, and you're constantly having to remember those or open up another workbook and go find them. If you had a Word document and had these things in there, here's the trick, which I thought is phenomenal. This is one of the coolest. I don't even know how she thought of this, but it's from Lindsay Poulter. She's one of the contestants in Iron Biz. So if you comment out up at the top what you want to call the calculation, you can drag that thing over into the measures and the name. There it goes. So I actually thought that could be really handy for me in real life, because I have workbooks with some really ridiculous calculations, and there are times where I'm like, I really want to make sure I'm doing this exactly like I did in this other workbook, and I'll open it up. So now I'm just going to put it in a Word document.
There we go. All right, and then spoiler alert. This was, again, anything can happen, right? As it turns out, and I actually asked Andy Cocker, I was like, how close were we really talking? It's like, there were multiple decimal points, and these two were exactly the same in multiple decimal points. And so, they kind of freaked out a little bit because they didn't have any contingency plan for what happens if there's a tie. And so they named co-Iron Biz champions. It turned out to be Josh and Hinson. And to show you all of the different Iron Biz pieces that were created live. So this is Hesham is the one who I mentioned to you a minute ago, has been using Tableau for less than a year. Just think about that real quick. So, he kind of came up. This is what he kind of created a new chart called the balloon chart. So he's using obviously a scatter plot up here. He's using a bar chart down here, and then he's connecting these dots and the significance of those
somehow
dots.
It's
connected.
Oh
yeah, it's connected. I mean, and
they're not,
there's some sort of transparent sheet that's happening. A couple of different things. But the other cool thing was that he actually kind of walked us around the world.
Yeah.
And kind of click. And again, I would tell you to go back and check that out. If you want to see how the whole thing works, go towards maybe about 40, 45 minutes into it. You'll see them do the presentation of their different dashboards. But don't skip on the front, because that's where all the jokes are. Like, if you like bad jokes, really corny jokes, the beginning of Iron Biz is really for you. Like, it is like corny data jokes flowing like a river, baby.
I actually saw on Twitter, he's going to Sunday, in case anyone's interested. He works at InfoLab in the UK, and he's going to break down very slowly how he built the entire thing on a webinar. So if anyone is interested, just search for InfoLab UK, Hesham, and you'll probably get the information.
And as beautiful of a dashboard as it is, one of the things that I thought was actually really interesting too was his analysis was really cool. So they're looking at diversity of cuisine in different countries. And so you kind of see, and this will be somewhat obvious, right? But like Canada and the UK, basically the question here is how many restaurants or how much food this person's restaurant is actually from that geography, right? So if you think of like Canadian food, just think about it. You can't, right? It's like null, right? So it's so basically like 99% of food in restaurants in Canada are from some other geography or ethnicity, right? Same thing in the UK, right? I mean, you have British food that let's see, British food, right? So, but in comparison, you go to Italy, where you go to Turkey or Mexico. Like I lived in Mexico for a year, and I can vouch for the fact that like if you want food from not Mexico, it's really hard and typically not good. So I had some terrible Chinese food when I lived in Mexico, but I would eat it because I didn't want Mexican food for a day. Then again, like the United States, right? The diversity that we have in this country lends itself to really interesting cuisine, right? So you have the ability to, I never, again, until I lived in Mexico, I didn't appreciate the diversity that we have in this country and the different cuisines that we have. Oh, what do I feel like tonight? Well, Thai food or Italian or so. Anyway, I thought the analysis I thought was really cool.
This was the other winner.
Yes, and so this was cool because the analysis was kind of cool. One of the things that I think everybody thought was really interesting was the way that the analysis presented in one way to kind of say, hey, here's what the diversity looks like in different places, looking at these different types of ethnicities and whatnot.
And use this button.
Yep. And then you use a button to kind of say, hey, but what's missing, right? Where are we not seeing, what's missing in our data, right? And so it's a great question, honestly. I think so often we can focus on the data that we actually have. We tend to forget about what do we not this, and she did a great job. The gotcha, I think, for her was that she built a very great business dashboard. The others had really great stories. And I think the storytelling piece is a huge piece in Iron Biz.
It's kind of a shame. This dashboard, I think, they all did amazing. They were all phenomenal. But this is something that you might actually see at work. And I think sometimes in a competition like Iron Biz, you've got to wow people. But in reality, in real life, people don't make balloon charts at work, but people do this. And just check out, if you go one step forward, this is nuts. Does anyone notice this? Okay, so this drop down that she made is now possible with, is it parameter actions?
Yeah, it's a parameter action piece that is also using collapsible containers. Yep.
So, have you ever seen a drop down where there's an actual biz in the selections? She's got a blog, and I've got it in the notes, so you guys will have it. But she's explained exactly how to make this and build it. It's not difficult at all, and that is something that I would totally use. I think that's actually really cool and very helpful.
And in some ways, just to be super clear, you could always kind of have a container that kind of folded up and folded down. The problem was, if you wanted to click on the thing that was underneath it, you couldn't because the container was sitting on top of it, right? What Tableau's now done with the foldable containers is that the container actually comes up. And so if I wanted to hover on any of these points that are underneath this thing, once I click that Lindsay's built, it actually folds back up, and I'm still able to interact with the stuff that's sitting underneath it. And that's kind of the game-changing piece of this. Again, you kind of have sheet swapping and stuff like that, and those are some hacky things. But what's cool now is that those sheets don't just persist themselves and be annoying. Does that make sense? If you know the word sheet swapping, that's kind of, anyway, you don't. Come talk to us later. With that, I know that was a ton of stuff. We did our best to kind of stay on top. Any questions on anything you've seen, or you're like, who wants to go to the Tableau conference now for next year because maybe you've never been and this looks really cool? Yeah, there we go. It's got some interest. I like it. Any questions on anything you saw? Karen, we'll be happy to answer.
Yeah, thanks.
You guys are okay. Jump in the back.
You said natural language processing for the servers got better with each version of
Ask Data, yeah.
2019.1. So does the server depend on how good the language processing is, or is it just more features that it's able to display?
It has everything to do. So the question in the back was, we mentioned earlier with Ask Data, you've got with every iteration of Tableau since 2019.1 when they first introduced Ask Data, it's getting better. And so the question was, what is it? Is it about the server? Is it more about the software? It really is about the software. And to give you a sense of that, the ability to kind of ask follow-on questions has been enhanced. The ability to kind of take a visualization that it renders and then kind of take that to another level and kind of say, hey, this is really helpful. Let me go. I'm going to actually use this to start a dashboard. I'm going to use this to start a visualization, drop some more filters in or whatever. So that can now become a starting place for building a dashboard or a set of visualizations using web authoring on Tableau Online, or Tableau Server, Tableau Online.
So does the NLP get better, even if you're still on 2019.1 versus 2019.3?
So the NLP is getting better because the software is getting better, right? So it has everything to do with how much they're building out inside the capability. So yes, it's getting better because they're making the software better. Am I answering your question?
I just want to, will it interpret the same question a different way? Not necessarily how it displays it, but do I have to have 2019.3 for it to really understand my language better?
Yeah.
Or is that just not, will that just come just because of their server?
It's definitely better the farther you go. And part of that, so one thing I'll say is, in the initial release of Ask Data, you could go in and kind of say, here's some synonyms for what this field is, right? So one thing to be thoughtful about is, like, if you have a bunch of really databasey names for your columns, you're going to not enjoy the experience so much, right? But if you have things like date and sales and things like that, where it's a little bit more logical, you'll be happier because typically what people are going to type in what was sales, what was revenue, and so I think more and more of that's getting built in because they have a bunch of data on how people are using it. So you might call it revenue, somebody else might call it sales. It may be, I think as it grows, it's smarter to be able to kind of say sales revenue. I don't know what the exact column or what people are going to ask for, but that's what this column is, right? And then the other thing that I think has been enhanced is the ability to ask a bunch of follow-on questions or to change a filter by clicking and stuff like that. We're going to give you a drop-down. Here are the other options you could have said. You could have said, hey, what was revenue in 2019? Then now you can click on 2019 and it'll show you, well, you got 2018, 2017 also in this data, which one do you want now? So just it's an interesting user experience. I'd definitely encourage you, if you have 2019.1 or greater, and you've never used the functionality, go check it out. But also make sure you watch a video or two, just kind of see what the capabilities are. All right. We'll hold the rest of the questions for our very talented panel, and we can think about those.